Domestic violence is a problem that's very serious. You can end up suffering from depression, anxiety, and bruises. Abuse can be from your spouse, parent, even your child. Recognize that your power comes from within. You don't have to conform to the ways of a man. Transformation must take place from the inside out. Make positive affirmations and speak them out loud. Think about you for a change and remove all obstacles. God's will is that we enjoy life until it's in abundance, not to be beat down and have someone control us. If you need help from your pastor, a counselor, or friend, go ahead, get the help you need. They'll help you to mend.
A Safe Place is a domestic violence assistance program providing services to victims and survivors in the city of Oakland, the Bay Area, and beyond. We recognize that domestic violence is a societal problem. Our study of domestic violence in the African American community shows that an estimated 29.1 African American females are victimized by their intimate partner in their lifetime. We want to thank those faith leaders who continue to preach about domestic violence from the pulpit. We want to thank those faith leaders who continue to support A Safe Place and encourage other faith leaders to become trained as they work with their congregations and the issues that surround many families. Most of all, we want to thank Blue Shield of California, who saw the need to study this project and to support A Safe Place. And A Safe Place will continue to work with faith leaders, creating partnerships, assisting them with resources, assisting them in getting more training, and we will be here each year to support those faith leaders who continue to join us in our fight to prevent domestic violence within the African American community.
I'm here today to talk about domestic violence. And a lot of you know that domestic violence has been a scourge that has plagued all communities, but especially the African American community. And as the publisher of a weekly newspaper, and as a frequent participant with faith-based leaders and educators and various community-based groups that are trying to help develop self-sufficiency, I have discovered that this is a concern and a phenomenon that has brought great shame both to the perpetrators of domestic violence as well as the recipient.
Somehow society has called on us to forget, that's my sister, that's my daughter, that's my niece, that's my mom. And you know, that ladies who we care about, if it's okay to do that to a lady, then the cancer spreads, and anything you wouldn't want someone to do to your sister, to your mom, to your niece, to your auntie, you need to stop it, because eventually that man or others like him will get to your family.
Thank you for joining me today. What we've been doing is working to increase the level of knowledge with faith leaders around domestic violence. But what I've also noticed within the African American community is that women, predominantly, that's what my experience has been with, have been reluctant to not only reach out to law enforcement, they've been reluctant to reach out to their faith-based leaders and remain in the relationship. So have you ever had any experience where you wanted to reach out or have had any exposure to violence where you did not feel safe in reaching out, whether it was law enforcement or?
I have encountered that violence within my life, period, physical, mental, and emotional. And yes, sometimes you get to the point that you want to reach out, but then you go back to the roots. See, I'm from the old school where you went through things and you didn't say a whole lot of things, you just endured it. But when I got into church, and that was my refuge. That was my safe haven. That was a place where I could worship and praise God. And then when I got the opportunity to move to tell the pastor, it was something sort of like when I got ready to say something, I got kind of dismissed. So I never approached him again about anything of that such of a nature. Even when you get ready to speak it, you have to feel somebody that wants to hear. And honestly, there is not many pastors, not male pastors, that are open to too much of that.
Do you think it's different within the African American community?
I think they've accepted it. I think they have accepted it. I know for myself, you think you can change something, and you really can't change what's taking place. And it was like, my life was like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of thing. You know, when he wasn't drinking, he was the best man you ever want to see. Go to work, take care of home, provide, do everything that you needed him to do. But when he started drinking, it became physical. Then it became emotional, and then it was verbal. And then I went into my safe haven, as I said before, was praying. And began to ask God to remove me from the situation, to remove me, or remove him out of the situation. Whatever happened, let it happen. But you still stay there. You still stay in there.
Mm-hmm. What I have experienced with working with victims is sometimes parents, moms, have encouraged their daughters to stay rather than leave. Do you think that's a part of the tradition?
For me, my mom she didn't say much. She was kind of a passive mother. And for me, I was one that was always in trouble because I was always got a mouth, and I would always stand up for what I believed in. And yes, mothers can sometimes persuade their stake in there, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. And that still comes from the old roots of growing up.
And the way we teach our children.
That's right. And they see what you go through. It also affects them. It affects the whole family. And our daughters see the beating downs and the whoopings. And so they feel, if mom took this, so if she went through it, then I can too. So we're teaching them the wrong values, showing them the wrong way to do things.
Do you think people tend not to call the police because of any reasons around law enforcement and not wanting to have their husbands arrested, or?
Yes, almost definitely. They'll call them, but then as soon as the police get there, they don't want them to take them. That has always been, I've never called him, and I never said don't take him if he did, But no, they don't want him to go. The reason for them not wanting him to go could be 1,000 reasons. He's the provider. And if you lock him up, then therefore there goes my food, there goes my money. I don't have anywhere to go. I can't. So they look at it like that. So I think that's a major part of why they don't want the husband locked up.
If you were given the opportunity to talk to someone who was going through an abusive marriage, what advice would you give them?
Get out. The first hit, get out. The first slap, the first put down, get out. Because it only escalates from there. It doesn't get any better. It does not. I was in it for 23 years. It don't get any better. I think that also when we got married, we were both in the world. When I got into church, he was still in the world. And so the alcohol and what made his issues that he had per se before we got married, he didn't get rid of them. And it plays, there's a lot going on in marriages. There's a lot going on in the minds of the men. And we don't know it. It's like a wolf in sheep clothing that you're grabbing hold to, but you don't know what you got until you get it.
Was your spouse or your husband in the church?
I was in the church, but he was not. And that, like I said, when we got together, we were both in the world. My life changed because I desired something more, and I needed something more. And when I got into church, he told me he couldn't marry a reverend. He couldn't marry a priest. He couldn't stay with me because I was that. And then all of a sudden it did a switch. It became angry and abusive. And it just drinking and all that went to there.
Do you think that women stay because of children?
That's a hard one. Because sometimes I think they do. They don't want to break the family up.
Do you think it's good to stay?
No way, form, or fashion is it easy. You should back up automatically. Get out. you're doing more harm to the children than you are to yourself. Once again, I just think it's the family. We as women fantasize so long about husbands and wives, and we look at these people on TV, which is not reality. But the reality is we want to stay married. We want to keep our family together. We don't want to break the family up. Grandma and grandpa stayed together for 50 and 60 years. We don't know what grandma and grandpa was doing back there, what grandma was going through. But we just tend to just want to hold on to it. We don't want to let go.
Have you seen any difference in the city of Oakland within our community around the prevention of domestic violence, or encouraging people to speak out, using our advocacy efforts to decrease violence even within the faith community?
We need to speak out about that. From the pulpit, from wherever we got a chance to speak about it, we need to speak out about it because it is prevalent all around us. I've seen young teenagers getting on the bus, beating their girlfriends down. I've seen them calling them names, kicking them in the streets while driving the bus, the school bus that I drive. And so therefore, it's getting worse. It's escalating to where it's truly out of hand. And somebody, the faith-based, have to speak out about it.
You have now a position where you can reach out and help. How does that make you feel?
Makes me feel good because I'm here to help other women. I don't want them to see them go through the same things that I went through, or even just sit in and think it's going to get better, because it never gets better. It only escalates. And so that's why I can tell them, get out while you can get out.
Why do you think young men who are raised by women, but are being raised in households where violence is occurring, do you think that has any impact on them?
They have to have a male role, and it's not one that beats women. That's for sure. They need mentors that take them, show them there's more to life than just sitting there beating on a woman. Get out, get a job, support yourself. Teach them how to be a man. That's what they need. Show them how to be a man. A man doesn't have to beat a woman. You're not a man when you beat up on a woman. You're really not a man. You're less than a man.
I agree. Thank you so much for sharing. We want faith leaders to become more educated around this issue. We want faith leaders to become a voice. We want to reach out to African American men and help them to understand what their role can be in helping to prevent domestic violence. So we want to engage men so that we can come together and help to prevent this issue within our community. So we appreciate, individuals like yourself, faith leaders who are really making the effort, having shared your experience, and you can truly have an impact on anyone who may be experiencing domestic violence, or maybe they're just not really sure if they should leave. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
I think another issue that we see, and oftentimes pastors are really busy, and we understand that, but especially with large congregations, is that the pastor may not always, or the faith leaders may not always be accessible. And sometimes people come and they want to divulge information about what's going on with them, but they have to make an appointment, or they get passed to somebody else, and the person actually wants to speak directly to who they have the most trust and the most faith in, and oftentimes they're turned away. And I understand that it's not intentional, but they don't feel comfortable sharing that information with just anybody. There's a certain level of trust required to share that kind of information with somebody that you, one, believe will keep it confidential, and two, somebody that really has the authority and the capability to be able to support you. And so oftentimes we see that members walking away feeling unsupported simply because the faith leader was inaccessible.
Why do you think men or perpetrators abuse?
I think it's inherited sometimes. I think that a lot of times men come from, we just finished I'm dealing in my church right now with dealing with pains and emotions and scars. And we had a man that stood up and apologized to women because he had been broken and hurt so much in his family that he took it out on everybody else. Now here's the key. He'd been in the church. but the men folk don't see it. And he didn't feel comfortable enough to go to them and say, I need help learning how to deal with anger. I need help learning how to deal with conflict management, because when I came up, this is what I was accustomed to.
My name is Jamal Hunter, Reverend Jamal Hunter of Imani Community Church. We are at 3300 MacArthur Boulevard, and we are attempting to develop a domestic violence awareness program or ministry within our church. It's very important for the faith community to get involved in these issues of domestic violence, because domestic violence really is family abuse. I'm a child of family abuse. Domestic violence ran rampant during the early years of my life when the police really turned a blind eye to it. When you understand abuse is about power, then you understand that the faith community has to intersect or intervene in that cycle. It's difficult to look out in a congregation and look out and see something that might be abuse, but you don't get people to talk about it. It's a no-no. Let's not talk about abuse. Because one of the main problems is often the faith leader is an abuser. We need to have trained leaders in our church. And we need for our trained leaders to emphasize the need for more and more people in the congregation to seek out this training. And the faith leader, the pastor, is the key person in the church. He is the leader of the church. He is the one that's going to provide the impetus for others in the church to get involved. We need to examine what exists in our church communities and beyond, and begin to find methodologies that help us to identify what domestic violence or family abuse looks like in our communities. When you begin to understand there are organizations that exist within our community, right here in Oakland, Safe Place as an example. They work so hard to try to cover the bases, 24-hour call-in lines, seeking places for women, men, and children that provides this sense of survival. You can survive.
And sometimes what it can feel like for a woman is we have shifted the light from the one who is suffering in the experience to training the brothers. And both have to happen.
Isn't it tragic that we try to pretend like we don't see what we see? Isn't it upsetting how we close our ears when our children tell us about Uncle Bob's hands? What's wrong with us that we tell women who are consistently beaten by men who say they love them that they ought to just stay there and pray? Prayer does do a lot of things, but when a fist is upside your head, pray after you get away.
You look at it from the woman's eyes who sees the police department coming into the community, and they enforce the law. That's what they're there to do, enforce the law. So you broke the law. There is no compassion with the law. It's the law. And that means that I don't care if I'm dragging your husband, boyfriend, significant other out of your household. The law is that he hit you or he pulled a gun or whatever he did, you broke the law. I don't care if your kids see it. I don't care if you have to go to court. I don't care if your rent don't get paid. I don't care if you don't have any food. I don't care if he's the food bringer. He's going to jail. So when a woman goes through all that in her mind, my God, if he leaves, I can't pay my rent, my kids are seeing all of this, he's going to be in jail, I got to take off my job to go to court. Never mind. Leave him alone. That's the law. And the law should be upheld. That's once again where we come in. We come in because we're not the law. We're not taking you to jail. We're not going to stop you from being a provider. What we're going to do is try to be an intercessor and be able to help you to work it out and look at your family and look at it in a different way. So if me as a woman that has looked at the African American community and seen my sons and husbands pulled out and put in jail and families torn apart, no, I'm not going to call. No.
And the other thing that I think is so important is we act as if the victim is thinking clearly. We act as if the victim is not traumatized, and so whatever step is taken out of the experience is one taken by a person who is traumatized.
Tanya McCall is the person that I'm thinking about. She was a member of the church and a faithful member, and her husband was having problems in their marriage. She had decided to separate herself from him, and he could not find her because she went somewhere and hid. He couldn't find her, but she had moved out of the home because of the domestic violence that was going on. And so the only thing he knew where she would be is on Sunday morning. She was so faithful to the church. He knew she would be at the church. And sure enough, 8 o'clock service, she came to church like she always did. And he was waiting outside the parking lot of the church. And when she drove in, he drove in behind her. And when she got out of the car, he ran her down and shot her dead on the parking lot of this church. Well, what it did for me is first of all, it upset me so much. I was so upset to know that he would have the audacity to come on the church property and kill his wife, stand over her and shoot her, and then pump 3 or 4 more bullets in her after she was down, and then get in his car and speed off.
And wanting somebody to get what my circumstance was, wanting somebody to intervene. The coaching I got was after being raped. The coaching I got was that I would be re-victimized and that it was not safe to tell. I know I cannot do it all. I'm not equipped to, but I love the work that A Safe Place does because they are equipped. They have the training, they have the resources, they know the law, they're equipped to support everyone who comes in what the next step should be.
When you find somebody who disrespects you, that beats you up and calls you names that you were not given, that's when you need to start looking for a safe place. A place that separates you from people who just talk love but don't do love.
And my religious leaders in the Army were quite different from the religious leaders today, because as soon as you go and talk to the chaplain about your problem, because my husband abused me, he beat me almost every day. And so when I went to the chaplain to talk to him, all he would do was call my colonel and tell the colonel what we just got through discussing. And my husband has had swords around my throat. He used to kick me in the head with combat boots. My kids would just stand there and hold each other, afraid to go to the MP station and get them to come to the house.
We should be sending our individuals that are leaders, that are trained to be leaders, we should send them to a safe place to go through 40 hours of domestic violence training because they need to be trained. That's the truth.
And secondly, too, a lot of times, the Caucasian pastors, most of them have money.
Yes, that's it.
They have money. They're able to send their leaders to,
exactly.
And they're able to do a lot of stuff that most black pastors can't do.
Right.
There's a few of us they can do that.
Yes.
But the average black pastor, especially in the Bay Area, he just doesn't have the finances.
One of the things that I've learned in my time in ministry is that money follows vision. And so if we have the vision, I think that some of the limitations in our ability to effectively address domestic violence have to do with not having the vision to do it or to make it a priority. You know, we can do everything else. We keep the lights on, we keep the heat on, you know, I'm not starving. But when it comes to domestic violence or intimate partner violence, there's no money. Or we're at a shortage of resources, or there's a lack. And so just as I listen and reflect, I'm inclined to believe that in most cases, it's not about the money. Because the question is, if you had all the money to do whatever you want, would you do it? And we're quick to say yes, but we haven't yet.
So if the world had the love of God, how many know there would be no domestic violence? And that's a topic we don't cover too much in the church. We don't say too much about it. And there's so many women, amen, especially in the church, who are suffering in silence. Because domestic violence thrives even in the church. But because you got a position or a title, it's not guilt, it's shame. You don't want to say nothing because you want to play the game that everything's all right when it's not. So in church you live one, I'm preaching now. In church you live one way. And don't let him have a position in the church. You better not go down there and tell that preacher nothing about what's going on in the house, because I want to stay on the deacon board. And you know what, church? We have been guilty. I'm taking blame for it myself because I've seen it even in this church where the man got away clean, but the woman suffered because the church didn't take any action when we knew she was suffering with domestic violence. I want to apologize to all of those women, all of those wives. I want to personally apologize for the church this morning, for the pastors who let it go, let it slide, because it was more important to have that person as an officer.
I love this faith-based initiative that A Safe Place is working on, because I experienced my domestic violence situation while in church. I was a lay minister in a ministry with my then husband, and people often wonder, well, how could that be? How can you be in a church and be experiencing abuse?
Every day he would wake up, he would find some reason to just come and slap me. I could be in there cooking, shining boots, ironing uniforms. He'd come in and just slap me and tell me I deserved it, I needed it.
I think we as pastors and we as preachers and we as godly men have a responsibility to those who we serve, to have them equipped to survive in our current environment. A lot of our culture teaches this kind of behavior. Another segment of our culture tolerates this kind of behavior.
Hi, I'm Keith Carson. I'm on the Board of Supervisors, and I'm also the co-chair of the Health Committee for Alameda County. Today we're talking about violence prevention, more specifically about the role that the African American church and faith-based leaders in particular play around violence prevention. I do want to thank Blue Shield of California and Against Domestic Violence program that they have, along with A Safe Place, for focusing on violence prevention. We know that a number of individuals go to their faith leaders in order to receive counseling and support. And we know that in the area of violence prevention, over 2 million individuals were affected by violence prevention last year across this country. And we also know that it unfortunately affects all of our communities. The role that faith-based leaders play is to be able to give counsel to individuals who are affected by violence prevention.
they're also able to help identify ways in which they can get help around violence prevention. In some cases, it's getting away from the environment in which they live. In other places, it might be mediating between the environment in which one lives, become mediating and having counseling within the family structure or the neighborhood structure or the support structure. All of those are very vital, important aspects of dealing with violence prevention.
So if I go to the store at the corner and stay 5 minutes, he was at the store and he was pulling guns on me every day and this and until one day I was so afraid of him. That's why I said a lot of times people don't know how to get out of a situation because they don't know who to go to and they don't know where to say or how to handle it, and that was me.
It worries me about people who assume that it's okay to abuse somebody and then tell God you're sorry. What about the person you beat up? What about the person you abused? What about the person you took advantage of?
Domestic violence cuts across all races and cultures and religions. But what we find is that people of all races tend to turn to their faith when they're in crisis. But our project has focused on the African American community because what we have found is that there has been a lack of awareness, there has been an enormous isolation of females who are victimized, and we have focused on the faith community because we recognize that the church has played a role in keeping victims in domestic violence situations, so we feel that they can help prevent domestic violence.
Love is never willing to damage emotionally, spiritually, or physically. The Safe Place is an organization that is dedicated and that is committed for the safety of those who are experiencing domestic violence. And if you're in a relationship where there is domestic violence, be it physical, psychological, then I pray to you, please get help and get help from the right source. Amen. Just because somebody can identify with what you've been through don't mean they're qualified to help you through it. And sometimes we seek help from people who are hurting. And at best what you get is you don't get help, you just get an understanding ear. But things don't change for you. So if you've been a victim of domestic violence, I ask you, please get in contact with that Safe Place and those who are trained to do that. Because God intends for you to live good. He intends for you to live your best. And you can't do that in a violent situation.